We spent the last month trying to figure out how would we know if our way wasn't working, and what would be the indicators to let us know that our way isn't working, and then how do we live a different way? And I think one of the ways that we find out that our way isn't working is that there's darkness in our life, right? There's just some areas that are dark. There's some relationships that just seem kind of dark. There's portions of our life that it just seems like, man, haven't you ever wondered this? Like, there's just parts of your life where you're just like, why can't we all just get it going at the same time, right? It's like, we got this area. Like, I don't know about your life, but my life's like a continual, like, shower curtain rod where you get one end up, and the other one falls down. You get that up, and the other one falls down. You're like, man, if we could just get everything going in the same way. But when that piece falls, and you're not expecting it, or maybe you are, and you knew it was a matter of time, it's like it just kind of feels dark. So when John writes these things about being a light, and he talks about the light of the world came into the world, we have to realize that back in Genesis, the way that it's talked about, and not just Genesis, but what we know about science, and here's the thing, we don't know everything there is to know about science, and science requires a measure of faith. We don't know everything there is to know about God, and God requires a measure of faith, and I think if we knew everything there was to know about both of them, we'd be looking at the same picture. But what we know is that there was darkness covered everything. In the beginning, there was a light, and that light began to do something into the darkness. Because where there's light, there's life. Light, there's life. I had someone send me a video clip this week, and I chose not to show it because I didn't want the emails from like, well, my kid saw this, and so anyway, it's the moment of conception. At the moment, see, now you're like, oh, that was probably wise. So. At the moment of conception, there's like a burst of light that takes place. There's a burst of light. Now, science say it's resulted to zinc, but okay, that's fine. Either way, there's like a light. When your very first, where does life and light start? Well, according to light, it starts at the moment of conception before any cell has split or cleaved or begin to become even an embryo, all of those kinds of things. At that moment, there's a burst of light because light equals life. And so when John's such a fascinating person when we begin to read what he had to say about this whole Christmas thing. He enters into this, and he knows so much, and we'll get into this. He starts writing from a completely different place, and he's like, yeah, there were shepherds, all this kind of stuff, but here's what you need to know. He says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and he was with God in the beginning. Without him, nothing was made that has been made, and in him was life. Well, how do we know, John? How do we know it was life? And that light was light. And all mankind, the light shines in the darkness. And we'll look at this. And so Jesus is the light that was announced with the Christmas star. It's the light that was announced as the moment that it began to go. And John says, I'm just not talking the Christmas star. I'm talking about where there's life, there's light. Light and life go hand in hand, which is why when you experience some of the things that you experience in your life, it feels like the life has been sucked out of you. And it gets what? Dark. And he goes, light and life, they go hand in hand together. And he goes, it's not just something that we embody. It's not just something we appreciate. It's not something that we just acknowledge. He goes, that light shows the heart of God because John writes this down. He says, love begins in the heart. In God's heart. Love began in God's heart, and it's shown in the person of Jesus, and that is written down in a text. We have that in a text, and the text was not just written for us to appreciate. It's not just written for us to go, oh man, that's just wonderful. It was written in a text so that we might live it out, because it will be the embodiment in living this out that will drive away the darkness. And I think it's fair to say that we all have encountered and experienced some darkness that, man, we would love for it to be driven out. Not just turned down, but like, let's drive it out. Let's get it out. And so when John says this, we need to realize that he's talking about being generous, and he's talking about being generous with your love and being generous with your care and being generous with your engagement. So John says this, verse 5. It's the light shone in the darkness. And we're going to look at the kind of darkness John was talking about. But darkness has nothing to say to the light. Darkness has never won. And so when you invite Jesus into your life, it's not a placeholder. That's not an interesting thing to add. You actually become light. Like you're coming to reflect light, and despair then cannot overcome it, cannot overcome you. And so let's dive into this a little bit more, because what John's talking about, he's talking about this. And if you grew up in church, and even if you didn't grow up in church, you probably heard the Christmas story this way. You probably heard the Christmas story in the version of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and they all kind of start, they all have different details, but they all kind of start in the same way. They all sort of start talking about a birth announcement, right? They let us know about this birth, and there's, mangers and shepherds and wise men, and, there's traveling, there's King Herod trying to kill all the toddlers. It's gruesome, it's graphic, and then it's engaging, and we have all of these stories that are written, and they're written because they happen, and people were like, hey, you got to get this in here. You got to remember these details have to go here. And they're like, oh, don't forget about the shepherds. And okay, we got the shepherds. Hey, don't forget about the wise men. Okay, we wrote about the wise men. Oh, don't forget to tell about Mary. Don't forget to tell about her story. And don't forget to write the details about the relationship with her and Joseph. That needs to be clear. Just tell it clear. Make sure it's clear. Make sure there's no confusion. Because otherwise people are going to be like, wait, what? Be clear. Did that happen? Yeah, it happened. Mary, what was you thinking about this? Okay, write down what Mary was thinking. Mary was, here, I thought this, and this was kind of where I was, and the angel called me, and I'm not to be afraid, and all this. And then you have John's gospel. And he gets into this story totally different. Now, John's an old man by the time he writes down this story. And he's seen a lot. And when he's sitting here writing down his gospel story, he knew he didn't have a lot of time left. And he goes, I know it's so important for these stories to get passed down. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they've given some wonderful details about this. And I know that, and then we find out that John writes this down later because of the book of Acts, and it kind of explains how this does. And we have no idea how many times John has told this story. Think about it. You're John. You're John. You're somebody. Every time you stop somewhere, what are you asked? Hey, you were there, right? Yeah, I was there. Can you tell me? What was it like? What was it like being with the Son of God? What was it like with the Messiah? What was it like for you to experience what you experienced? Tell it what it was like, John. You were there. Tell us, John. Imagine sitting around with Grandpa John and just every holiday, wouldn't it? If you got to see him, wouldn't you ask the same question? Hey, would you tell us that story again? No, I wouldn't do it again. Really? How many times do you watch the same Christmas movie over and over every year? Okay, there you go. And so John, tell us what it was like. So John is this person, and the more that you see what this person is, John is the guy who reduced the story of God down to one word. John is an old man now, and he's like, all right. Here, let me give you the cliff notes of the story. God is He's love. He's the one that said that. And his experience, you cannot even begin to imagine. He's lost friends, and not like they moved away. Some of them did. He's seen many of them killed, slaughtered. He'd seen family members slaughtered. He saw almost an entire society wiped out, whose entire culture, because John was alive. He was there when Nero sent General Vespasian through into Galilee. And Vespasian starts to work his way down from the northern part of Galilee all the way down into the Jewish cities and the Jewish towns, slaughtering thousands and thousands of Jewish people, sending hundreds of thousands of Jewish people to the slave markets back in Rome. And John watches all this. John lived through that. John knows darkness. He understands discouragement. John lived through the time when Vespasian left his son outside the walls of Jerusalem, and John had spent many, many years of his life inside the walls of Jerusalem. He lived there, he worked there, he had been there at the time of Jesus and before and after, and so the city of Jerusalem was there. He was there or close by when Vespasian's son starved the entire city of Jerusalem on the inside, and plagues break out, and they try to get there. He's around at the time of 70 when the entire city of Jerusalem is destroyed, and he's there when the temple gets burnt to the ground, the entire Tillion. Millions of Jews have been slaughtered by this overtaking, and hundreds of thousands have already been there. He's seen Peter and Paul. He's been around at the time when both of them are executed by Nero. And yet, through all of that bloodshed and all of that loss and chaos we can't even begin to imagine, John writes at the end of his gospel, he says, and just so you know, everything that I've told you, and Mark and Matthew and Luke, they've told you, Jesus did many other miraculous signs, but these are the signs that we are writing about. These are the ones that we have time and space to record in the book, and I'm just giving you a taste of what it was like to experience Jesus. I just want you to have a little bit of taste of these, and I've written these things down, not so that you be entertained, not so that you be intrigued, not so you be amazed. I've written these down so that you might believe. I'm writing this down so that you'll believe. I don't care if you're amazed. I don't even care if you're impressed. I want something more for you than that. I want you to believe. And he begins to write this, and in spite of everything that he's seen, everything that he's smelled, can you imagine all of the burning bodies that he has smelled? Everything that he's experienced, all the destruction, everything that's important to him has been wiped out to some level. And he begins to write this down. And in his gospel, he does not start with a birth story. I think that's fascinating. Because it's the same John that after Jesus died took Jesus' mother Mary, and he like, John, I want you to view Mary as kind of like, your mom, and Mary, look at John as like your son, and you guys are going to need to take some time together. And so they spent all this time together. They spent so much time. Many people think there's even some theories that scholars believe that John took Mary up around Ephesus and kind of kept her safe, kind of out of all this destruction through here. But he spent a lot of time with Mary. And you can't even imagine, I'm sure, the amount of times that John had the opportunity to sit down with Mary, or when they were traveling with Mary and when they were escaping with Mary, to ask Mary, can you tell me one more time, what was it like when the angel came? What was it like when you found out you were pregnant, and then you're like, how could this be? How? What was it like when you first held him? What was it like when you first experienced him? What was it like when you found out that people wanted to kill him? What was it like at his first miracle? What was it like when you lost him in the temple and you couldn't find him? What was it like when you begin to realize, oh, he's not like James? What was it like? What did the shepherds say when they showed up? How did the wise men, how did they know? What intuitive thing told them that this was a star that they needed to follow? How did they begin to put all that together? Mary, how did you do that? And Mary doesn't talk about this. Mary, tell me, when you heard about Herod was slaughtering Jesus or babies to find Jesus, and you knew that was your son and that you had a responsibility, what were the conversations like with you and Joseph to begin to do all this when you knew that we got to get out of here as quick as we can? John doesn't start there. John's letting us know that, hey, I grew up in a time when it was really dark. It was so dark. And he's also letting us know that Jesus was born in a time of society and in a place in culture, in a part of the world that it was just really, really dark. And when he sits down to begin to write and pen, he puts these extremely important details into this, and he reminds us that there's something going on. And he says, in Jesus was light. In him was life. And that light gives life. And he writes down and he says, when I think about Jesus, the best way I know to put it is, in him was life, and that light was the light of all mankind. Even the people that tried to kill you, even the people that tried to kill you, even the people that burned down the temple, even the people that burned down the temple, even the people that were slaughtering thousands and thousands, even the people that took people into slaves. Jesus says, yeah, well, they're in darkness. And in Jesus was light, and that light gives life. And John sits back and he says, now I want you to know that Jesus just didn't come for us. He didn't just come for the Jews. Jesus came for all of mankind, both now and for future generations all over the world. And he brings with him this element of light and life, and everyone gathered around him and says, yeah, right, I get that, but now he's going to restore the kingdom of Israel, right? John just kind of smiles. You're going to do something to run the Romans out, right, though? I mean, like, what's the plan here? We got to get rid of the Romans. This is a bad deal. How are we going to take care of this? You're going to, this light also means that we're going to reestablish our independence, and we're going to, reestablish all of these different things. And John says, well, yeah, but this is what Jesus said. There is a time, but that's none of your business about the time. Because you need to know that for every single group, every single generation, every single ethnic group, every single nation, every single language that's around the world, Jesus said that they're to be his disciples, all of them. And that's what he said. And he says, well, you're to make disciples of all people, all nations, because that's what love and light does. It illuminates all. It's not just a light on one specific area. And my favorite part of John chapter 1, verse 5 is when he says these words, and we have it in our house, and I think I've told you about that before, but he says, and the light shines in the darkness. I can't even imagine the kind of darkness that John experienced. Everything that happened, all the people that died, everyone who was executed, everybody that he saw being crucified, everyone that was taken away. And in spite of all that he's seen and all that he's lived through and all that he's seen, he says, darkness hasn't won. It's like he understands this, and he says the light of Christ is the light of Jesus, and it overwhelms darkness. No matter how dark it is. No matter how many times culture will try to blow out the light. And because right now our culture, the Roman Empire, they're trying to blow out the light. They won't be successful. They've tried to stamp out Peter, and they've gotten rid of Paul. And maybe perhaps at the time, he may have been the very last apostle disciple living. So maybe he's saying with a grin on his face, and everything that it's trying to do, he goes, they won't be able to knock out the light. The light has come. You can't knock it out. I mean, Caesar tried, couldn't do it. Tiberius tried, couldn't do it. Nero couldn't do it. And the destruction of the temple didn't do it. And the death of Jesus himself did not do it. And he would say to us, all that your culture is experiencing now cannot do it. Even cancel culture cannot cancel out the light. This is the John who raced to the tomb of Jesus that day, and when he had heard from him he was risen, he thought that the body had been stolen, and it hadn't, and he rushes into the empty tomb, and then he's having breakfast with the risen Savior. He's sitting there in that moment, and he's letting us know, and he's letting not just us know, he's telling the story again. He's saying, no matter how deep your heartache, because my heart is aching, no matter how extreme your fear, no matter how deep the depression, no amount of darkness can put out the light, and this light can live in you. By the time John writes, and we get over to verse 8, or chapter 8, by the time we get to chapter 8, John writes this. He says, when Jesus spoke again to the people, he said this. He let people know, I am the light of the world, and you're going to need light because there's going to be times throughout human history when it's going to seem so dark and so chaotic. Now for you, some of you are going to see this in your lifetime, but it's almost going to be like every generation, every other generation, in all cultures, all over the world, there's going to be these intense moments of darkness. And he goes, I am the light of the world, and whoever follows me, no matter what's taking place around them in their family, in their community, in their world, no matter what's taking place in their culture, whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So Christmas, when we're confronted with maybe more than at any other time of the year, when Christmas we're confronted with the fact that we can't solve all our problems, right? That you have problems you can't solve. You yourself, you may be a problem you can't solve. You keep trying to figure yourself out, and you're like, I can't figure it out. I don't know why I do the things I do. I don't know why I said that. I don't know why that. Like you have people in your life you can't control, and that frustrates you. And no matter how rational you are, and you have the most, isn't it true? You have the most rational conversations in your head with people, and you're like, and you try to have rational conversations with other people, and you can't figure it out. You're like, it's so rational. I don't understand why you can't see this or understand it. And so when we look at this, it's like we try to tell ourselves, no matter how many times you have people in your life that just aren't empathetic and they just feel like they're not listening, no matter how many conversations where you feel like you can't control other people and you can't control their expectations of you, and you struggle with your expectations of them because there's expectations that you're never going to meet. And that sometimes feels like darkness. And John said, Jesus came. Matthew, Mark, Luke, they told you about the manger. Yeah, the shepherds. Yeah, it's all true. Yeah. Yep, star, sure. How else do you think the wise man found him? Yep. Was there camels? I don't know. Well, all the pictures have camels. Yeah, because there was a photographer there that day. Yeah. Right. What about the holy donkey? We got one of those at our house. I don't know. What were the beams made out of, or the manger? It was so dark. So dark. And I look back on this, and even though the darkness just seems to be overtaking the world, the light is alive in me, and it can be alive in you. And we call this season the most wonderful time of the year because of what happened when my Heavenly Father and your Heavenly Father sent His Son into earth to be actual light. And He says when the light enters into the darkness can try. It's going to give a really good effort. It's going to be persuasive. It's going to be manipulative, but it won't be able to overcome it. And not just that, but the light can live in you, and you are to reflect the light. You need to be the light of Jesus. In your family, at your workplace, in your neighborhood, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. So how do we become the light? I saw this. Anybody seen Duck Dynasty? You've seen that show? Yeah, well, you'd be all right. There's one of the daughters on the show, and she did this illustration, and I want to repeat the illustration that she did. So I need you to get out your phones real quick. Okay, I want you to get out your phones. Just hang with me for just a second. All right, if you need to catch a quick selfie, get a quick selfie of yourself. It's probably been a minute. And here's what I want you to do, because I want to explain, we're going to look at this over the course of this month as we lead ourselves into Christmas, and we're going to end in here on Christmas Eve morning. We're going to have regular services in here in the morning, and we're going to end with candlelight. And I want to explain something to you here for just a second. So I want you to go to your home screen. Mine's got notifications right now. Apparently there's something going on in college football. It's controversial. I don't know. Swipe through that. I want you to hit the flashlight button on your home screen. So if you're an Apple user, this is it. If you're not an Apple user, I don't even know what to tell you. I don't know. All right, so can we all turn our flashlights on real quick? See, this is why we have to be the light. But there's something very, very challenging in our culture right now that makes it very difficult for us to be the light, okay? And one of the things that we don't realize is when we have light on, it makes a huge difference in our room. It makes a huge difference in our homes. It makes a huge difference in our workplace. It makes a huge difference in our community. It makes a huge difference in our nation. It makes a massive difference in our world. Leave your phone on. Now, here's what I want you to do. If you're on your home screen still, you on your home screen? I want you to swipe from right to left. Swipe right to left. Yeah. Swipe from right to left. Apple users, please. What happens? Yeah, now my selfie camera's on. Right? Some of you are going to have to do it again. I understand. I know. You're like, wait, what? It didn't work. Okay, follow with me. Go back, you got your home screen, hit your flashlight, and if you hit your flashlight on, and you swipe from your right to your left, it's my selfie cam. And the light goes out. And what you need to understand is by design, you cannot shine the light and be focused on yourself. By design. It's impossible for you to shine the light of Jesus if you're consumed with yourself. It will make your light go dark. And we are called to be the light of the world. And Jesus said, your light needs to live in us and it needs to shine. And he says it in this way. Matthew wrote this down. He says, guys, you're not going to want to miss this. You're not going to want to miss this. He says, look, Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. He says, you are the salt of the earth. But if a salt loses its saltiness, how can it be salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. And here's what he says. Matthew says this. You are the light of the world. You. Jesus came, but now it's you. And you wouldn't put a town on a hill. It cannot be hidden. He says, don't put your light under a lamp, under a bowl. Do you know how 2023 church, do you know how we put our lamp under a bowl? We swipe to the left. And we focus on ourselves. He said instead you need to put the light on a stand and it's going to give light to everyone in the house. So why has it been getting so dark? Maybe because we've been spending so much time on ourselves. So we have a fundamental problem that we need to deal with this Christmas, don't we? Maybe we didn't even realize. Because Jesus, according to John, well, Matthew says it too. Jesus is the light. And if you don't feel life, it's maybe because you've got things messed up in your life, and maybe all on your phone. So today, as we close, we're going to sing again, and we're going to move all the way to Christmas, and this is going to be just tremendous. And it's another way. I mean, really, all fall has just been connected. If you've been paying attention all fall, it's really just been one series. We just chopped it up to help you stay engaged. You're like, so we're doing that one again. But it's all been this idea of can we be made for more? How do we understand if our way is not working? How do we begin to explain and begin to not explain, but live out this light of Christ in our life and in our community? It's all been connected. And if you've been with us on this journey, you're starting to put some pieces together. And so maybe today, you've got some dark areas in your life and you just want to light a candle because that phone thing just didn't work out for you. You tried twice and it just didn't happen. You just want to go, let me just do the candle. Great. Do that today. Some of you may want to take communion and go, Jesus, I just need you in. And man, I want to expel the light. I want to reflect the light. And others of you may need to write down some things that they're just dark. They're things that you've been consumed with. And it's almost like you feel like darkness is winning. Maybe today you just need to be reminded. Like Grandpa John just sits down with us and Grandpa John goes, I know what it's like when you feel like darkness is winning. But I've seen it all. I was there through some of the amazing miracles. I was there at the crucifixion. And man, it's gotten worse. But I still believe this because I know it to be true because of what I've seen with my own eyes. Jesus is the light of the world. And even though what you're going through right now is hard, the darkness will not, cannot, it's impossible for it to overcome the light. And your family, your workplace, your community needs you to be the light. So let's put these down. And let's shine the light this Christmas season. Father, today we're glad and grateful to be called your people, and we're so grateful for Jesus, and we're so grateful for the Christmas story where we stop once again this year and we just take a knee and go, Jesus, man, our world doesn't seem to be getting better. It seems to be there's just darkness. Some individual families this year have experienced darkness. And Jesus, right now, the score for darkness is 0. Light wins every time. Even though it seems like, oh, this is the time. It's coming down to the end of the game. I think darkness is going to get one. You said no. It's time for us to turn up the light in the midst of the darkness. You would never hide the light when it can give light to the whole room. So Jesus, would you help us to realize we've been made for more, to be the light that you send into this world, to reflect the light of Jesus. It's in your name we pray and sing.
Hey there, and thanks for joining us today online. If you loved what you experienced today and you're local to Kankakee County, we'd love to invite you back for our in-person worship services. You can visit GatheringPoint.church anytime for more information. We hope to see you soon.